Welcome to the CDI CTO Podcast presented by CDI Studios.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the CDI Office of the CTO Podcast. I'm Brian Kennedy, our CTO for the Intelligent Operations Division. Hopefully, you've been able to see some of our previous episodes, particularly the Get to Know the CTOs episode. If not, you can check that out and understand more about my background and my role here at CDI and what we really mean when we say intelligent operations. Today, I'm joined by Errol Roberts from our longstanding and very elite partner at Cisco. Welcome, Errol.
Thank you, Ron.
We like to keep things casual, so why don't you just start by, kind of introducing yourself to our listeners. You've been with Cisco for over 20 years. I find that extremely impressive. You've actually secured a very impressive designation as a Distinguished Architect as well. Getting to know you a little bit, it's clear you worked with a lot of customers and have really seen the evolution of this space and really Cisco as a whole, the overall marketplace evolution. So could you just share a little bit about your role and kind of background and your journey at Cisco?
Yeah, so thank you. So Errol Roberts, as Brian indicated, I sit in the Global Enterprise Segment CTO office. So by virtue of the fact, similar role to you, we get an opportunity to interact with some of our largest customers, small ones as well, and really about shaping strategy, direction, and looking at technology evolution and making sure that we're aligned with their business direction, the challenges they're facing, and how we address it. So in the role, we tend to interact with some of our largest partners, but we also provide input back into our development teams in terms of, what's coming, what is it that we should be investing in, what are the shifts in the market, what are the customer requirements. So there's a dual role of, being an advocate for technology for sure, understanding the customer challenges and problems, working with customers, but also shaping our product strategy and direction. I started Cisco way back when. You said over 25 years. I was a software developer before I got to Cisco and had an interest in networking. And through a colleague, Cisco reached out and I joined the team as a system engineer and worked over time as a consulting engineer. And now I'm an individual contributor as a distinguished architect, focusing on a range of technologies. So as you indicated, I spent time in routing and switching. I've looked at the application space. Now more FSO is one of those areas we're focused on. Certainly, I spent time in other transformation technologies like RON, routed optical networking, but there's a whole bunch of different transformation that's certainly happening that as a team, we have to be mindful of. And there are others on my team who are focusing in various aspects of where the industry is headed.
Right. I love the way that you described the role of sort of CTO and being part sort of advocate for the solutions that we're representing that we believe in that would help our customers, but also sort of in your case, feeding back to product development teams. A big part of what we do is feed back to our services teams about how they're going to actually build.
I should mention services as well. Yes.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the things along the way that sort of led you to having a bit more of a, not that observability or the FSO solution from Cisco is necessarily your focus, but you've gotten more involved in that. Do you have any kind of stories or things that you could share about, what led to some focus around observability and FSO?
Thank you for that. My interest started as customers started adopting a multi-cloud, a hybrid cloud environment. Certainly the need to have insights in terms of what's happening with the infrastructure, what's happening with the application becomes more and more apparent. And then I begin to ask myself the question, how do we play a role here? So certainly customers are looking at, well, you know what, I don't really understand my application performance. Performance becomes an important thing. The experience of the users become an important thing. Yeah. So I started exploring, okay, what are some of the applications that we have today that really addresses some of those challenges? And that was really more looking at the tool sets, as it is today, right? We talked about, hey, when you think about observability, people start out in their own domain, but then as you look at the application placement, the fact that users are now more mobile, we're accessing resources from anywhere. Yeah. Now you have to look at the holistic picture. Yeah. And that's really what spawned my interest in terms of, okay, how do we solve this problem? What is our role as partners and as vendors in this community? How can we help our customers deal with the challenges in terms of really having a better experience relative to the services that they're trying to deliver?
Was there any kind of particular customer experience that maybe you could elaborate on?
Yeah, so I didn't want to name the customer, but certainly there is like a large customer out of Germany, customer in Europe, and here in North America. Similar challenge. Hey, I'm moving. Actually, there's one pharmaceutical who not so recently, migrated to the cloud, and their question was they didn't refactor the application, but once they did the migration, they're like, okay, how do I think about cost optimization? Am I consuming the right level of resources relative to the services that I'm trying to offer? And their bigger challenges are really more, hey, I've now have this vast connectivity domain between how is this infrastructure behaving? I can see what's happening locally. I can't really see what's going on within the cloud infrastructure. So generally the conversation tend to start around cost optimization and also connectivity and also the application performance. And I'd say that's true for all our customers, regardless of where they sit.
Some version of that.
There's some version of that globally.
I mean, I was going to ask you about. I think I'm fairly well on the record at CDI at our events and some of the previous podcasts about kind of how I define observability, which has become somewhat of a buzzword. And I mean, we've been doing things like monitoring and collecting logs and looking at particular pieces of the puzzle that you've been describing. But it seems like there's this shift now to maybe it's partially because of the cloud trends, it's because of the mobile trends, that is about this holistic, kind of picture. Is that how you would describe observability, this buzz term, or is it sort of more specific in some way?
Yeah, so I'd say, there's the observability. One would say, hey, look, I can get observability within my own domain, right? So then I can look at, okay, what's happening within my network stack or my compute stack, my application stack. But we at Cisco tend to look at it from a full stack. Right. Because at the end of the day, it's really about the end user and the application experience. And that application experience is going to be delivered. There's a number of components that are going to make up that delivery of that particular service and the experience that you're going to receive. So when we look at observability there, we're trying to look at the insights that you're going to be able to gain across all the various components that really deliver a really quality experience for that end user. So what we aim to do is really reduce the mean time to repair. We're looking at working across silos, looking at the mean time to identify problem, try to get as clear to real time as possible. At the end of the day, just kind of looking at breaking down the silos and really be able to give you a much, much more richer experience, leveraging the tooling that you have on the infrastructure, hopefully reducing the tools, then not necessarily reduce all the tools, but at the end of the day, bringing the relevant data sets together so you can really then kind of say, hey, look, am I having the right application experience? Is my end user getting the things that they're looking for? So that's the way I definitely approach your question.
I love hearing the word experience over and over again in your description, right? Because I think when I think about the history of how we kind of found ourselves around this situation of observability, I think originally it was kind of about availability. Like, is my database service available? Is my network available? Right? These are very basic building blocks, if you will. And then at some point we sort of shifted to performance, like, well, it's available, but is it really performing kind of the right way? But it really has become about the end user experience now. Like, what is the real experience? And it could be much more granular to like, well, this particular user in this particular location on this type of a device is not having a great experience, even though all my performance metrics and everything of all the individual components are telling me that everything is fine.
You hit the nail right on the head.
So I've never found a customer yet who has disagreed with the vision or said, yeah, geez, we're good there. We really don't need it. So what is your maybe some perspective on, like, what's making it challenging for our customers to get there and really be focused on experience, break down those silos and see the full stack, as it relates to that end user experience?
I think one of the challenges that we see oftentimes is really more the customers operating. You have teams operating in silos, and that's really, so you have to address the people challenge, And then you kind of look at from a tooling perspective. Yes, I have domain-specific tooling that gives you the insights, but then the question now becomes, how do you get the data sets to go across? How can I extrapolate what's really happening, that observability, the insights per domain, but then correlate all of these to really give you a much, much more richer insight in terms of what is happening end to end. I mean, if you think about your distributed app today, if there could be a failure in, let's say, a web component, an API component, a network infrastructure failure, it may affect just a portion of your application, but the overall availability and the experience of different constituents may not be optimal in terms of where you want it to be. So what we're aiming to do and what customers are aiming to do is really kind of get more insights to really have that 100% or close to 100% insight in terms of what's going on. I like your example in terms of saying, hey, look, one user could be having a fantastic experience and the other user could be having a not so great experience. And then, so how do you discern that? Then you're going to have to look at all the data sets, whether it be the metrics, the events, the logs, the traces, to really understand what is the nuances that's making that experience not the most optimal for that particular user. So I'd say you hit on a couple of different things. I mean, I think the pandemic kind of really accelerated digitization for a lot of folks. And at the end of the day, now we're a lot more mobile. Folks are expecting to have a rich experience. People are doing everything more and more online. My elderly dad, a lot of things that he used to do normally, now you say, hey, Errol, I need a laptop. I need you to get online and do things. So, everybody in this generation is now more digital. And once you get there, then really, at the end of the day, if the experience is not optimal, that user may want to switch and look at a competitor's tool set, a competitor's offering. And hence why customers is a lot more focus, and certainly a lot more focus in terms of a shift in terms of wanting to get the teams together, but also more to be able to get the data sets together so you can have that richer purview in what's going on.
It really kind of breaks down to, or it really comes down to, maybe is the right way to say it, breaking down some of those silos, whether it be in data or in individual teams of users who are responsible for different elements of a solution. I couldn't agree more that that's what it's all about. You mentioned things like events, traces, etc. Right? So this acronym MELT has popped up and become very, very popular. And I love it. I really, because I think it helps customers to sort of better understand the types of data and the solutions that they may have already adopted, like what kind of data they're collecting and how. But when I'm talking with customers about MELT and trying to sort of educate them, I find that most people understand metrics. They've understood metrics for a long time. Like, hey, my CPU is running at 72% utilization at this particular instant in time. Or they, most understand logs at a very detailed level. Like, hey, this is really granular text-based information about what's occurring in the system. I think when it comes to events, there's a little bit more confusion. Like, how do I really define an event? Is an event an alert? Is it an incident? People start looking for sort of acronyms around an event, and then traces. If you haven't come from like application development world to most sort of operations folks, I think traces are sort of very foreign concept. Anything you could add around MELT and how do you define an event?
I think you covered it well. If you look at some of the documentation, they tend to leave out the event because they figure a log is also an event, and an event is really more an advance, is an extension of it could be a trace is an event, a log could be an event, but you hit a trail. And it could be a log, exactly. But I like the fact that you mentioned alert as an example, because even though I may be getting structured or unstructured, logs in terms of what's going on in different parts of my code structure or my application structure, when I get an event, usually it implies that something is happening, something that maybe I may want to be alerted by potentially. It could be that I may want my pager to go off because this type of log entry, as an example, could trigger something that I should go pay attention to. But So I'd say it closely relates to everything else that's there, and it's one of those. The event part is really, it's always been there, but it's really more of a sign that you probably may want to do something.
Right.
That this is something that you may want to pay extra attention to,
Yeah,
and then
like
go
a rule, right? Where
exactly.
Hey, if I see this text inside of a log, or this metric goes out of some normal range, then I want to go ahead and create an event, and that's going to cause additional things. It could be a workflow triggering incident.
Exactly.
Could be an automated remediation.
Exactly.
How about traces? Are you seeing people
traces for sure? So as customers move to cloud native application development, and you kind of think about your own experience when you go shopping, you kind of gave that experience of you talked about a user, that individual user, and that experience that they have. Let's say you and I go shopping on a particular website. I may complete my transaction in seconds. You may take minutes to complete your transaction. Now, what's going on? What were you doing? Okay, so it'd be good to kind of have a transaction log or a trace to kind of see, okay, what was Brian doing while he was on this website? I see notes, he clicked here, clicked there. So that helps you to get a better picture of the overall experience that users having within that application.
And even external systems.
External systems as well. Agreed.
If you're shopping for a product that maybe the particular e-commerce store, everything is kind of local to that solution ecosystem.
Yep.
Whereas maybe I'm shopping for a product that's more partnered with that ecosystem. Now I have to call out to a third-party
Exactly.
And the third-party web service is what's really slow. Right.
Yep.
The trace would help identify that across our two.
Exactly. And at the same time, be able just to kind of keep and give you a holistic picture of what the experience within the application look like. So at the end of the day, when you think about, and the reason why I brought up, cloud native apps is because now you're in this much, much more distributed world, and you kind of highlight that you basically were leveraging an API, a SaaS service that external to you. You may have multiple application services that's distributed across multiple clusters or pods in different domains. Now, how do I really keep track of how all these pieces are behaving for the most part? That becomes
traces
certainly a challenge. At the same time, it introduces something that we're not talking about here yet, but security. How do I secure this environment, and how do I bring security in this overall experience in the conversation as well?
Let's segue to that, because we talked earlier about domains and sort of fragmentation, and I don't know that there's a better example of that. If we talk about it in context of observability, people are probably thinking, well, there's the network guys, and there's the database guys, and there's the application guy. But now it's like there's the more infrastructure and applications operations guys, and then there's the security operations guys, and there's guys doing security engineering, and there's doing all the traditional infrastructure and application engineering. And security still remains so much a focus, and particularly security operations. But they were funded so well. I think customers spend so much money and effort and time on security solutions that it became this huge operations observability thing in its own right. And really, if you boil it back down to that idea of melt, that's what essentially both sets of teams are looking at, right? So I'm seeing a trend where customers are at least considering a consolidation between maybe what you would call a traditional NOC or SRE type capability with security operations, and bringing those engineering teams together as well. Do you think some of the changes that we've been talking about help with that? Is that what kind of has to happen, or is it more optional, or do you think?
Yeah, well, see, that's an opinion. At the end of the day, if we're to look at the notion, let's go back to experience again. What are the things that could really impact your experience today? Security becomes a critical component.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying now, the how in terms of the operations team coming together, I think every customer, every group is going to approach that differently. But certainly in the context of the application, certainly what we're seeing is that we have to instrument security within the application, whether it be runtime security, whether it be inspecting, let's say, the APIs, the code, the container, the images that's going to be making up that application. But as well as when the application is executing, we also need to understand what are the risks that are associated with the application. It therefore means that definitely the security team have to work more closely with the dev team and also have to work more closely with the operations team and look at the tooling. So there could be shared tooling in some cases, and definitely going to be your specific tooling that may be associated with the extended threats that security team may need to deal with. But what's definitely happening is that really there's a combination of the app experience with security, because if the security is not there, that impacts the app experience anyway. And it therefore means that within the app, and as we develop the app and as we look at, let's say, full stack, security has to be an integral part of that. One of the things that we've been doing at Cisco is kind of say, hey, look, how do we look at security much more deeply within the FSO offer, and then look at, let's say, how do we score incidents that are happening? So if when we look at an app, okay, is there API security related issues, there are threat related issues with that's going on, and how does that affect the overall application performance? And then what's the associated risk with that? So glad you brought that up, because that's certainly critical to overall app experience.
I think it has to happen. Like in order to sort of sustain, kind of investment levels that I'm seeing in customers, and to be focused on that experience kind of measurement. These worlds have to come together.
I completely agree with you. So what we're doing is actually bringing in a lot of the security signals in addition to the in-app security to understand the overall security impact, and at the same time be able to provide the relevant insights to the security team, the app teams, the infrastructure teams in terms of what's happening and what's going on.
We've been talking a lot about sort of generalized trends and architecture or philosophy. Let's transition a little bit more to Cisco's particular, kind of vision and solutions around what you guys have coined full stack observability, which I love, by the way, and I think it is a unique perspective. My opinion is that all kind of good plans start with some kind of a vision and a focus. How would you describe what Cisco's sort of focus was as embarking on this journey that you're describing as full stack observability?
Yeah, our main focus, and we've highlighted it quite a bit actually, is really to focus on the most optimal and secure experience for users and our applications. Yeah. And really going back to how do we bring the team together? How do we reduce the minimum MTTR? You can say mean time to problem resolution, mean time to repair.
But mean time to innocence.
Mean time to innocence. And then also, how do we break down the silos across, typically networking, security, applications, cloud, bringing these various teams together. So therefore, when you really look at the app and you think about the end user experience, we're making sure we're looking at the signals and the insights to guarantee and to really create a much more optimal, application usage and a much more application oriented behavior, optimal experience for the user. So it's really bringing those silos together. I mean, we have always had domain specific monitoring. We looked at observability and insights within domain, and we're saying, hey, bring everything together across domain so you really get the full stack in terms of what's happening within the enterprise.
Anything you could elaborate on in terms of how your tools do that? Like,
so we started out with pairwise integration and recognize the fact that there may be users who have their domain specific tools as an example. So we really focus more on the end use cases because you can say what is the use case and what's the outcome that you're trying to drive, but fully recognize as an example that my applications team may have their own APM tool as an example. In our case, AppD, and they're looking at the telemetry within AppD, right? But whenever there's a challenge within the infrastructure, or let's say there's a performance challenge, they'd like to get insights in terms of what's happening with the network. Is it a network-related issue or is it an app-related issue? Because they're looking at the synthetics, the signals that's going between various components within the app. So what we aim to do there is going to say, hey, look, they're going to be customers who are on a journey that has some tooling. But what we want to do is actually says, how can we get the telemetry and look at the cross-domain telemetry to give you a better insight. So one of the things that we looked at there as an example is how do we get telemetry between our Thousand Eyes tool that really gives you extreme visibility across what's happening across the internet, what's happening with your SaaS providers, your API providers. Combine that telemetry to be able to say, hey, look, from an app point of view, they can get an insight into the app and also into the performance of the network. So one of the things that we're looked at there is really more bidirectional telemetry across both domains. That's a pairwise integration. And that's, one of the starting points to say, hey, look, how can I give it the most optimal experience, looking at, the app and also the network infrastructure right away, to then understand end user experience, end user behavior, and at the same time be able to tell each environment to kind of say, hey, look, you know what? If I'm in the network infrastructure, the network infrastructure team can understand, okay, what's the behavior that most critical service that app for that particular business. At the same time, the app user can say, hey, you know what? I understand my behavior. I can see where everything is working out well. At the same time, we have also been looking at, let's say, how do we create a horizontal platform approach, taking open telemetry and melt data to be able to ingest that into a platform. So now you can begin to bring all the telemetry. You don't necessarily have to do peer-wise integration, but now the integration focus is really leverage on the platform. And what we've done there is actually offered, our cloud native tool sets in terms of at the cloud that gives you a visibility in terms of what's happening with the cloud native applications, the Kubernetes stack, and the app itself built on the FSO platform. So kind of like two motions, if you will. The peer-wise, kind of leveraging customers who want to still, it's going to take them a while to kind of get into a platform approach, but at the same time allowing them flexibility and insights in terms of integrating the tool sets to get more of a full visibility in terms of what's happening with the infrastructure.
Do you think Cisco will continue down? And you probably, there's things that are happening that are very hard to keep up with in terms of your guys' acquisitions. I think anybody who's involved in this space recognizes AppD as a tremendous force in the sort of application performance market, even in some of the sort of infrastructure things. And then, no better solution than ThousandEyes in terms of looking at some of the network, telemetry. Is there anything else that you could highlight that sort of is pushing the FSO strategic vision along in terms of acquisitions or other things?
We've made a number of acquisitions. We acquired Opsani, we acquired Epsagon. We have made a number of acquisitions. There's also one early acquisition, I can't remember the name now.
Kenna?
But Kenna more on the security side, and we're bringing the security telemetry in. But certainly just on the platform itself, there's been a number of acquisitions in terms of AI-related acquisition, more insights and strengths around metrics as more on tracing as an example, and building out a data platform. So we're continuing to make investments in the FSO in the FSO space. Certainly you see a lot more security integration, but you're also seeing the ability to say, hey, let me offer you a platform that not only allows you to look at the insights and in terms of what's happening with your application, but by now having a platform approach and making contributions to open telemetry. By the way, we're one of the highest contributor in terms of open telemetry. Among other vendors, we're one of the most. But what's the value of what we're trying to do there? Now we're saying, hey, look, if your data set is OTel compliant, whether it's coming from the security environment or the network infrastructure environment, you can now begin to ingest this data onto a platform. You can create your own entity and be able to say, hey, look, what's the experience around this particular entity? So where we're going to is give you the flexibility to now kind of say, hey, look, this platform can now be used for other things, but at the same time, partners like yourself could go in and be able to develop application for customers in terms of addressing additional customer challenges that they may have in their own environment.
I'm glad you brought up partners, because I think from our point of view at CDI, we see a lot of vendors kind of focused in different areas. I think there's a lot of excitement around OTel. In a certain perspective, the sort of collection of telemetry is being somewhat commoditized. Like it's going to continue to move in that direction.
Sure.
Where we have to innovate, and where I think customers, our joint customers, need a partner like CDI, is to help them sort of with their data that is now collected and has become simpler to do, what do we actually do with it? How do we customize our view into this data? And I think your platform approach is a great.
You hit the nail on the head. So whether it be a case of they're using or tooling as it is today, not necessarily the FSO platform, you as a partner, at the end of the day, they're going to be some business metric that they're looking at. So how do you bring into one view and align the telemetry, the network telemetry, the performance, the infrastructure performance telemetry, security-related telemetry to that key business metric, as an example, if they're tracking transactions. So helping the customer to be able to visualize that, to kind of think through that, and relate all the various components, that is one key aspect. Certainly on the FSO platform, like you mentioned, you can actually go build new applications that leverage the data set that they're gathering, the Melt data set. So there's opportunities to work with the FSO solution stack the way it is today, the FSO platform approach there is today from a partner point of view, to help our customers really achieve the experience that they're looking for and provide the business insights that they're looking for. So one of the key foundational difference for us is really more looking at the business metrics, not just the telemetry on the performance, but how does it affect the business in whatever KPIs that you're measuring. And that's a uniqueness where partners like yourself customers really need help with partners like yourselves to really help them deliver on the outcomes that they're looking, both for the internal users and also for the external user who is consuming the services that they're looking at.
Business context is so important. It's another thing that I use all the time to try to either define where customers are in terms of maturity journey in this space, or if they're not there, sort of help them understand that when you get there, when you can look at all of this stuff in context of what it means to your business, that's really when you're going to be in the position that you need to be.
I fully agree with you. Fantastic.
Well, thanks so much, Earl. I appreciate you joining us today, and of course Cisco's overall partnership with CDI. I know I'm looking forward to collaborating with you further and helping our customers around this FSO vision. If our listeners want to kind of get any more perspective on Cisco's full stack observability solution, what would you recommend?
I'd say, hey, talk to the expert.
Well, that is certainly an option.
It's sitting right across from me. Certainly, if you want to look at our website, you can go FSO. That's cisco.com. Go FSO. Certainly, there's lots of videos around. If you have attended or Cisco live sessions, as an example, you have a login. There's lots of FSO material that you go look at. And I've actually checked out your website that you have FSO all aligned. So therefore, certainly can start there. Can certainly start with your team. Also, starting with the Cisco team.
I love you brought up Cisco Live. I think there are some wonderful presentations from some of the most recent Cisco Lives on this. So if anybody wants to on their own time investigate, please go check some of those things out. They're easy to find. Well, thank you everyone to our listeners for tuning in. I hope you found some of this information and discussion useful, and continue to check back in with us as we release new episodes on this medium. Thanks again.
Thank you, Brian.
The CDI CTO Podcast is brought to you by CDI. It is produced by Alyssa Hall and Spencer Grogan. To learn more about CDI, you can visit cdillc.com. The CDI CTO Podcast is a production of CDI Studios.